Peace talks, Russia and Ukraine. Disaster, as far as I can tell, happened this week in Istanbul. The two countries did agree to a major prison swap, but they failed to make any progress towards a ceasefire. Last we heard, I believe, Anna's going to keep us fully up to date here, Trump took to Truth Social to tell America about his latest call with Putin. So, Anna, break this mess down for me, please.
Well, honestly, it really does appear as though President Donald Trump has kind of given up on securing a peace deal between Russia and Ukraine. And look, it's something that he kind of promised when he was campaigning. I know politicians promise the moon and the stars when they campaign, but he kept repeating something over and over again. If you don't remember what it was, take a look at this.
If I were president, and I say this, I will end that war in one day. It'll take 24 hours. I know Zelensky well. I know Putin well. I would get that ended in a period of 24
You can break that deal.
100%. It would be easy. That deal would be easy. A lot of it has to do with the money. A lot of it has to do with the military, that we're giving. But I would get that deal done with.
So, he kept saying, it'll be easy, I can get that deal done. But it's not so easy because, quite frankly, Vladimir Putin and Russia is winning this war. They're taking hold of more and more Ukrainian territory. And, Trump did go in a completely different direction just recently when he was having this joint press conference with the German chancellor. And here's what he had to say. It's getting a lot of negative attention. Take a look.
Sometimes, and this is me speaking maybe in a negative sense, but sometimes you see two young children fighting like crazy. They hate each other and they're fighting in a park. And you try and pull them apart. They don't want to be pulled. Sometimes you're better off letting them fight for a while and then pulling them apart. And I gave that an out.
So they do plan on fighting more. In fact, Russia had announced that they intended to retaliate against Ukraine for something known as Operation Spiderweb. And honestly, this clandestine military attack by Ukraine was both genius, but also a little terrifying because they used, like the supply chain, the commercial supply chain, in order to smuggle drones deep into Russia to attack their military assets specifically, including their, bomber planes. So we have some details on that. Let's take a quick look.
Drone flying out of a truck in southeastern Siberia, 2,700 miles from the front line, targeting Putin's warplanes deep in the heart of Russian territory. Ukrainian officials said it was part of a clandestine attack that saw 4 military airports hit, destroying more than 40 warplanes, in the biggest blow of the war against Moscow's long-range bomber fleet.
Okay, so now Ukraine claims that this attack destroyed, they used these drones. They apparently destroyed these Russian warplanes, including the ones that deliver nuclear weapons. They claim they destroyed like 40 planes. However, so far it's been confirmed that about 10 planes were destroyed in Russia. And this cost Russia $7 billion. And Ukraine also claimed, by the way, that their operation, which they've dubbed Spiderweb, destroyed 34% of Russia's strategic cruise missile carriers. As you can imagine, Vladimir Putin not happy about that. And if you do this in the middle of a peace deal, or peace negotiations, I should say, it's going to serve as a disincentive for Putin. And he's already begun the retaliation. Take a look at this.
Tonight, a ferocious Russian assault following Ukraine's coordinated drone strikes deep inside Russia. Russia now blasting residential high-rises in Ukraine's second-largest city of Kharkiv and destroying this government building in Kherson. The barrage leaving more than 40 people dead or wounded across Ukraine. And Ukraine is now bracing for even more, what could be a much larger Russian attack at any moment.
So I'm not surprised that this is how Vladimir Putin has responded to Ukraine's successful attack. I'll just say one more thing. It's notable that Ukraine specifically targeted Russia's military assets, whereas Russia is bombing residential buildings and government buildings as well. So,
can I say one thing first, and then because I want you guys to attack me on this one, simply because I did think that Trump was going to be able to resolve this pretty easily. I did think that this was like a money laundering operation to siphon off money from taxpayers, give it to the military-industrial complex to drop bombs. We then go in there like heroes, take their minerals. You know, they have to, the World Bank is forcing them to lease out their farmland, the breadbasket, which is like the most valuable farmland in the world outside of Iowa. And all of a sudden, you've got like Cargill and Monsanto in there farming their GMO crops. And I just thought this was all this corrupt globalist plan. There were off-ramps, we didn't take them. And I now am looking at this going, oh my God, I was so wrong. Putin is absolutely as crazy as it gets. He is fully a vile monster. Are we going to need to arm Ukraine to hold this guy at bay? Like, I've now gotten all the way back to where we started. So, so go.
I'll just say this. Both things are true. Okay, so Russia is in the wrong. They invaded a sovereign country.
Right.
But, you know, the military-industrial complex would never miss an opportunity to make money. You know what I'm saying?
But he's not stopping.
Well, especially after now that Afghanistan is essentially over, they need a new cash cow.
Right.
And that's why
Well,
you
that's
have
what I
all
thought.
these defense contractors hovering around Congress like a pack of vultures, trying to keep this war going. And so I think you're actually right on both counts. People want this war to go on. They love the forever wars. And I'm still have a very jaundiced view of Zelensky, because I still think that he is not administrating the funds that we so generously gave him.
We didn't give him funds, though. I watched him say to Lex Fridman, "You guys didn't give me money. You gave me weapons."
Right.
Okay, I can feel the both of I'm going to go Tommy, then I'm going Amy. Go.
We're also propping up their government and their civil servants. So he might have said, you didn't give me money personally. Okay, I still disagree with that. I would love to see the Doge audit of Ukraine, right? But yes, we're propping up their civil servants and their programs in Ukraine, which a lot of people have had enough with. President Trump, the only person that I believe, at least from a leader's standpoint, that really does want to see the killing end is President Trump. I believe that he wanted to get a minerals deal done because I believe he wanted the United States to have a stake in Ukraine without going and winning a war for Ukraine, plunging us into potentially a World War III. Nobody wanted that. And to his point about I could solve this in 24 hours, okay, that was an exaggeration. However, if President Trump had been president...
Tommy, that's extraordinary hyperbole.
Well, I will tell you this, though. If President Trump were president, when, as Joe Biden said, they might make a small incursion, I don't think it would have ever happened. And if the incursion would have happened, I think it would have been swatted down so quickly that it never would have metastasized to this level. President Trump was given a bag of crap by the former president or whoever was running the former president. And now he is stepping back saying, listen, I cannot solve this for you right now. I have tried, but the two parties are going to have to figure it out. And maybe we're going to have to let them figure it out before we step back in. And that's where he is.
Can I just really quick, an observation that I found particularly interesting, they talked about this on the PBD podcast, is like, obviously Ukraine, they're kind of losing this war right now. The sentiment from the Ukrainian people, they do not want to antagonize Putin more. So who empowered Zelensky to feel so confident that he can go and do what he just did? And what they were speculating on the PBD podcast, could there be somebody at home? Could there be somebody in the US who's saying, if you go and do that, then we'll have your back?
Let me make the argument for it real quick. The argument that I've heard is deterrent. So it's like, and Russia, by the way, don't think you're immune. You better show up to these negotiations because look how we can hit you. That was the excuse.
So Ukraine is arguing, we didn't use American weapons. We used these little drones. And as a result, we didn't need to consult with the United States. The United States says they weren't consulted with. I don't know if I believe that because, to be quite frank, the U.S. government has an interest in denying their involvement, specifically because you're kind of playing with fire. You're using commercial supply chains to smuggle like drones into a country. That's terrifying because that could happen anywhere in the world.
Right.
And on top of that, we can't forget about the fact that we're dealing with a nuclear power, and that's Russia. At the same time, though, I think that attacking Russia's military assets as effectively as Ukraine did sent a message to Russia that, hey, you winning this war isn't necessarily inevitable. The other thing that I'll just quickly say is, look, I don't know whether or not Russia would have invaded Ukraine if Trump were president as opposed to Biden. But I will say this. In the beginning of this war, Russia was backed into a corner. Russia was losing.
I saw
However, the
initially.
United States and UK discouraged Zelensky from entering peace negotiations because the US and the UK had an interest in essentially depleting Russia's military capability. That was a big mistake.
And I bought that entirely. I was the whole, like, we provoked it. I bought into it. But Putin doesn't care.
He doesn't.
He doesn't care about being isolated. He doesn't care about sanctions. He doesn't even care about, like, secondary sanctions and tariffs, going after the countries that do business with them. Nobody cares. So there's now no deterrent, and Trump's already on to Iran. So in that conversation, supposedly it's like, hey, I don't want Iran to get a nuclear weapon. And Putin's like, yeah, I got you. Wink, wink. So what's going to happen then? Is this done and Ukraine is going to be flattened and that's the end of the story?
Going back to what Amy just said about Zelensky, I think it's extremely rich for him to parade himself as some like emblem of democracy, and he halted elections in his country. Yeah, I get that there's a war going on, but there's no democracy in his country right now. He's just going to serve as supreme leader.
But
So he didn't
is this
decide
a
that-
foregone conclusion? That is what I am asking you guys.
I have no idea.
Are we out?
I mean, it doesn't look good for Ukraine. But just to respond to what Lindy just said, I can understand feeling that way about what's currently going on in Ukraine and the fact that they haven't had elections. But Zelensky unilaterally can't even make that decision because Congress in Ukraine passed a law indicating that at wartime, they have to pause all elections because they're at war. You get what I'm saying?
Did they pass that law under his, jurisdiction and encouragement?
I mean, I don't
Probably,
know. I don't
right?
know,
Like,
but
they
it's the
wouldn't do
law.
that.
Well, here's my thing on that, and I don't know. But why does he have so much time to go on podcasts and go to
Exactly.
Hollywood
And do Vogue covers with his
prance
wife?
around? That to me is what really rubs me and a lot of the American people the wrong way. That's what's keeping a lot of people like myself, who maybe are more isolationist, America First people, when you see this little clown traipsing all over, doing Vogue cover shoots, you see him going on podcasts, but you're like, but he said on the podcast, listen.
Okay, but Putin did some podcasts too. He did Tucker.
Listen.
Okay,
The
all right.
difference
Touche,
between Zelensky
touche.
walking around wanting to be hailed at the Academy
I see.
Awards, and then all the
I
stuff.
see
He
it.
wants to be. He is a celebrity. That's how he started. He wants to continue to be a celebrity. So it's very hard for Americans who are struggling to be like, let's give more to Ukraine. Let's win this war for them. When you have a leader that looks like that and acts like that.
So is that the answer then? Is we just back out?
And someone who
we don't support
refuses-
Ukraine anymore because that will be the end of Ukraine at this point. There's no peace deal to be had. If we don't give weapons, we know where it's going. End of story.
I mean,
and then on to Iran.
way that
The
he
European
walks-
allies are still going to support Ukraine. Obviously, if the U.S. decides to drop
Without
out
us?
of supporting Ukraine, I don't know if Ukraine's going to be able to make it.
Who
But
is their biggest supporter
Macron.
funder? Is it Germany?
Macron,
is the
France,
the top
Germany,
country,
UK, Poland.
and then the U.S.
I believe Poland is Poland really did ramp up their military spending, especially for NATO, in order to be able to defend themselves, of course. But they also want to support Ukraine because it's not just about Ukraine. If Putin is emboldened after taking complete control of Ukraine, he's probably going to move on to the next country.
Well, it's not just
insane.
Putin, though. You
It's
know
a pretty
what
big
other
decision
country
you're making to let it go.
You know what other country is watching this with like eyes of an eagle? It's China, because they are going to decide what they're going to do with Taiwan.
They're gonna invade
based
Taiwan.
on America's reaction towards Ukraine.
100%.
And based on Trump's rhetoric on Taiwan, he doesn't seem like he's going to intervene either. So
Trump
China's
has
getting
done
all
no
of it.
sanctions. He's decided not to, arguably because he's trying to get a grip on Iran, which is a whole separate show unto itself. But personally, I would let Israel go in and deal with them. They're chanting death to America. They're not going to enter into some cute little agreement, in my opinion. But
As long as the
I
US
think
stays out of it,
consequences
fine.
You say that, but then what happens? But all right, I guess
Question,
we
really
won't
quick. Has anybody checked to see if there's any more like covert, sneaky funding stacked into the big beautiful bill? Because remember, they tried to put that into the bipartisan border bill.
Oh, girl, there is some additional money for defense, right? So hundreds of billions of additional dollars, and that's going to be on top of the National Defense Authorization Act, which they pass every year with no debate.
Right.
And it's quickly approaching $1 trillion a year.
And you know what Department of Government fails their audit every single year? Every single year without fail. It's the Pentagon.
Thank you so much for watching Her Take. If you like the show, can you help us out by subscribing to the channel, clicking the notification button, sharing, commenting, joining the conversation? It helps us out a ton with the algorithm. We appreciate you.